Okay, so structure number 1 is our what? Water vacuole. Okay, and the water vacuole uses turgor pressure to support the shape of the cell. If there's something about supporting the shape of the cell or turgor pressure or something like that, okay, that's good for the function. Okay, structure number 4. What's the outside of the nucleus called? Sydney? Nuclear membrane. Okay, anything about securing the nucleus, keeping stuff out of the nucleus, okay, allowing DNA out, okay, something like that is good enough for the function of that. Okay, what's number 5? The nucleolus. Make sure that that one is spelled correctly. Okay, the job of the nucleolus: controls protein synthesis, copies RNA, DNA, something along those lines is good for the function. Okay, what's number 8? Golgi apparatus, yeah. Okay, Golgi apparatus packages wastes for removal from the cell, or controls exocytosis, or puts things in vesicles. Okay, something about waste. Yeah, that's fine. All right, number 10, what are we looking at? Mitochondria. Mitochondria carries out cellular respiration, burns sugar for energy. Okay. Number 11, cytoplasm. The job of the cytoplasm: facilitates diffusion. Okay, and I said that was exactly what you should write down for because we added it to our notes because I had forgotten it originally. Do they use diffusion? No. Yeah, if they said transports by diffusion, I'd be okay with that. The key reason the cytoplasm is there is diffusion won't happen without it. So the key thing there is diffusion. Okay. All right, number 12. What are the little dots? Ribosomes. Okay, ribosomes make protein or synthesize protein. What's number 14? Chloroplasts. Carries out photosynthesis. Okay. Number 15. Very outside. Cell wall. Supports the shape of the cell. Okay, and 16. Layer just inside. Cell membrane. What 2 words am I looking for there? Endocytosis and exocytosis. Good. All right, it's out of 20. Okay, give him a mark out of 20. Let him see it, and then put him up here on the desk in front of Jake. Plant growth and development. So now we got to look at what does a plant do as a multicellular organism. So there's going to be quite a bit less in this lesson about the cells of a plant and more about a plant functioning as an entire organism. What are some things that plants need to do in order to grow, in order to survive, develop, okay, reproduce, okay, things like that. All right, so we have to understand first off what factors influence the growth of plants. Okay, what kind of things would be a factor affecting the growth of a plant? Okay. Soil, sunlight, water, carbon dioxide, yeah. Yeah, competitors, temperature, okay. In fact, I would say that, I mean, yes, certainly we've got the things a plant can't live without: sunlight and water and soil, but believe it or not, I mean, temperature is a big one because temperature can influence some of the others, okay? If the temperature is below freezing, can the plant access water? No, okay, because the water, even if it's plentiful, is frozen. okay, and is not in an accessible form for a plant. So things like that are things that we don't always consider, but we should, things that can affect the growth of a plant. Also, if it's below freezing, what can happen to the water in the vacuoles of a plant cell? Yeah, it can freeze. And as we know, water expands when it freezes, but water also becomes crystalline, and crystals are sharp, and they can actually rupture the cell, okay, by just like poking little crystals out the water vacuole, out the cell membrane, and actually rupturing the cell. So if you've ever seen like a tomato plant after it's frosted, okay, like if you grow tomatoes at home, and you always have to be checking whether it's going to freeze at night, and you got to go cover them up because they're very fragile. When they freeze, the water vacuoles rupture the cells, and the plant just like essentially turns black and limp and soft and just falls, okay, and it's dead. Right? Other plants have a much greater ability to survive freezing temperatures. Okay, like in my garden, the tomatoes were dead, months ago. Okay, and I still have carrots. Okay? Even after the snow, they're still green and growing. Okay, I really should get out there and get them out of the ground, but okay, they last longer in the ground than they do in the fridge. So, but their foliage, the green part, still surviving. Some of it's a little touched, okay, by frost. I mean, we did have that snow and whatever else, but some plants are better able to survive a freezing event than others, and that has to do with whether they actually evolved in that climate or not. So things like potatoes and onions and things like that are much better able to survive those kinds of events because the water inside their vacuoles has usually got other stuff in it. It's not pure water, and that can lower its freezing point a little bit so it doesn't freeze as quickly. Okay, now it gets to be -10 and stays there, everything is dead. Okay, but I mean, if it's only going to be -2, something like that, they can probably make it. Okay. Learn what hormones are responsible for growth and development in plants. Okay, hormones are chemical messengers. All organisms make them. Okay, obviously we're more familiar with the ones that are in animals. Okay, but plants also make hormones. The difference with plants is every cell in a plant can make the hormones. In your body, that's not the case. Okay, my nerve cells don't manufacture insulin. Okay, and similarly, the cells in my pancreas don't make adrenaline. Okay, there's just certain glands in our body that have specialized cells for making just one hormone, right? Whereas in a plant, since they don't have a circulatory system, every cell's got to be able to make these hormones, and all these hormones do the same things that they do, or similar things to what hormones in the human body do. That is, they affect responses. Sometimes it's a growth response, sometimes it's a maturation response, okay, and sometimes it's a fight or flight response. Obviously, plants don't have a fight or flight response because, well, they don't. If a plant had adrenaline, I don't know what it would do with it. I don't know, like wave its arms around. I don't know. Okay, but they have other kinds of hormones that do similar things to the hormones in our body. Okay. Some of them would trigger them to show a lot of growth. Okay, that would be addition of length. Okay, some would signal growth that is what we call secondary growth. There's primary growth in a plant, that's getting longer or taller, and there's secondary growth, which is increasing the girth of the plant. Primary obviously occurs first, but if you only have primary growth, you get a lot of foliage and length with a real skinny stem, and you'll fall over. So secondary growth also has to happen in order to support that. Okay. So we'll be looking at those different kinds of hormones. Thirdly, understand that plant shape is not fixed, but it is the result of the interaction of environmental factors and growth responses. Okay? These two plants are genetically identical. Okay? I grew this one from that one, okay, a while back. Do they look exactly the same? This one looks like it needs some water. It's pretty light. Okay? How do they look different? This one's a little bit darker. Yeah, the leaves are a little darker, and the leaves are a little smaller than this one. Okay, well, the reason for that is that they grow in different conditions. Well, they used to, because there used to be a TV that hung from the wall here. Okay, and this one actually hung from the TV. And every time I watered it, I would turn it. Okay, so that the leaves were, any new growth faced the wall instead of the window. Okay, what was I doing? Yeah, exactly. If it makes new leaves and I turn those leaves so they don't face the sun, it has to grow more leaves on this side. Everybody follow? Okay? And because it was up underneath the television, it was actually partially shaded by the television, so it tended to grow larger leaves in order to capture more sunlight. Okay? This plant used to grow over in the window, and I never turn it, which is why there's only growth on one side. The sun was always in the same place, and the sun was direct and intense, so it grew smaller, thicker, darker leaves, okay, in order to protect itself a little bit. It doesn't need a huge surface area. It can just grow, okay, and kind of get places. Everybody follow me there? Okay, so a plant's shape isn't fixed, not like ours, right? Like when you're born, you've got 2 hands, 2 feet, right? And eyes, ears, and a nose, and all that kind of stuff. Our final shape is pretty much fixed. Okay, we're not going to just miraculously grow a 3rd leg, okay, or something like that. It's just not going to happen. But for a plant, their shape is not predetermined, but it will be the end result of their environment. Okay, and there you can see this sometimes. There's some pretty funky looking plants out there that have had some sort of, thing that's gone on in their life that's caused them to have to radically change their shape in order to survive. Okay, I remember one when I was working at a golf course when I was in university. Okay, there was this spruce tree that had a trunk like this. Okay, because there was a rose bush or some kind of bush that grew right here. They probably started growing around the same time. Okay, but obviously a spruce tree has a much slower growth rate than a shrub. So the shrub started growing and probably shaded out the little sapling, so it started growing so that its foliage would be in the sun. Once it got into the sun, then you don't want to keep growing sideways as a plant, because what will happen? Well, you won't get higher, and you get a lot of weight a long way from your anchoring point. You could tip over. Okay, so that we would start growing straight up and down again. Plants actually do have a sense of up and down. Right? It's important for them to have a sense of up and down, because when they're young, they can't always tell where the sun is, because there may be other larger plants that are shading them out, like this one. Okay, so it grows a little bit towards the sun, then once it gets into the sun, then it grows straight up again, because straight up generally guarantees it's going to be in the sun. Right? So it started growing back up, and then actually grew back over its roots so that it wouldn't get too heavy on one side and tip over. Okay, and eventually started shading out the bully that shaded it when it was little. Okay, but it had this wow in the trunk. Obviously, no one's using that to make lumber out of. Okay, those would be the most crooked boards ever. Okay, but some trees will grow like that. Okay, lots of times you see them on hillsides. Okay, because on hillsides, especially if they're really steep, there could be a rock slide or something like that that pushes them over. And then instead of growing straight out, which wouldn't really hurt them light-wise, it would hurt them in terms of balance if they were to grow out at an angle. So here's our hillside. Most trees would grow straight up like this. Okay, because up is where the light is. But if they get knocked over early on in life, okay, they'll grow like this, and then rather than continuing to grow out, which would still result in them getting light, they grow back up again, and they get a bend in their trunk. Okay, now remember, they don't just like bend the trunk. This is where the top of the plant would have been, and then it would start to grow and add growth in one direction. Okay, over the course of time, that results in the bending of the plant. Okay, everybody follow that? Okay, those are called tropisms. We're going to talk about the tropisms a little bit later on here. Okay, so kind of an example in this picture, but it's a little bit hard to see. This tree right here, how about use something other than black so it shows up? Actually, it looks like that. Okay, the trunk of that tree is crooked. Okay, probably got pushed over, okay, by a rock slide. I mean, this is obviously a pretty steep, rocky slope. Okay, got pushed over and had to grow out at an angle, okay, in order to survive. Okay, now, which is going to result in, I mean, light is still a factor here. If you grow out straight out like this, what's going to happen to all the branches on the bottom? They're going to get shaded out, and you're not going to get much sun there. And you can actually see that in some plants that have grown sideways for a while. They don't grow much in the way of branches on the bottom. because there's no sense in wasting energy on that growth. They're not going to get a lot of sun. Okay, so they tend to grow in one shape or another. All right, so plants have this problem. They're rooted to one location for life. Okay, because this isn't the Lord of the Rings. Okay, they're not Treebeard and the Ents. They don't walk around and fight wizards and things like that. Okay, a plant generally responds to environmental cues by adjusting its pattern of growth and development. That's the only way a plant can respond to changes in its environment. Okay, therefore, the program for development of the plant is somewhat plastic. That means you can mold it. Okay, plants of the same species vary in body form much more than animals of the same species. Yeah, sunflowers are weird. They actually follow the sun throughout the day. They kind of turn, which is actually not a growth response. It's a change in where the turgor pressure is, and that can actually turn the head of the flower. That happens during the day. It's a turgor pressure response as opposed to a growth response. Okay, what do you suppose that plant is growing towards? Yeah. Especially with small sprouts, if you got some, like, if you plant some alfalfa or you plant like beans or things like that grow fairly quickly, if you don't turn them on a regular basis, they grow towards the sun. Okay, and they get lopsided and they fall over. Especially because sprouts are kind of dumb and they just kind of do that. Okay, most of the time, not because so much that they're dumb, but most of the time sprouts are planted in a place where the sun is directly overhead. Okay. For a lot of stuff in my garden, I planted indoors starting in March, because obviously you can't plant it outdoors in March. Okay? In fact, you can't really plant it outdoors until it's like the end of May, because it could still snow. Okay? But if you don't turn your kind of little greenhouse thing around, all the plants will grow towards your window. Okay? So you end up having to always turn it so that they grow evenly. Otherwise, they just get heavy on one side and they fall over and die. Okay, so the growth of a shoot towards light is called positive phototropism. Photo means light, and a tropism is a growth response. Okay, there are essentially 3 different growth responses that we're going to look at. They're all caused by a different thing, but they all happen in the same way. The way a plant makes itself change its shape is the same regardless of what's causing it to change its shape. Okay? So the 3 things that a plant really responds to are light, obviously, gravity, because gravity generally indicates where light will be, and touch. Okay? Some plants you can change their shape by training them. If you've ever seen those bamboo that they sell in the store that have like the spiral in them, okay? The way they do that is they actually pin them to a pipe. Okay, so they stick a pipe in right beside the bamboo, and they just keep tying the bamboo with like a twist tie to the pipe. And then as it grows, they add more ties and keep pushing it against the pipe, and then they take the pipe out and they sell it to you as this fancy looking thing. Okay, but all they've done is essentially trained the plant by touch to go a certain way. If you've ever seen ivy growing up the side of a building, honeysuckle does this, things like that are climbers. Peas up a pea fence, okay, sweet peas, things like that. They have those little vines or tendrils that they can use to grab onto stuff. Okay, that's a growth response to touch. Okay, the advantage of using something like that, okay, a growth response to touch, is you don't have to use as much secondary growth. You can concentrate on primary growth and get really tall because you're using something else to support your weight. Okay, so climbing plants get tall by using the structure of something else. Okay, everybody know what I mean when I say like ivy crawling up a building? So, okay. All right, so in a forest or other natural ecosystem where plants may be crowded, phototropism will direct the growth of seedlings toward the light, and that, of course, the light powers photosynthesis, and that can be controlled by different types of plant hormones. Okay, so we're going to talk about the hormones, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the growth patterns that they can cause. Okay, so there's 5 major classes of plant hormone, each concerned with a particular environmental stimulus or response of some kind, okay, within the plant. Now, obviously, these are growing towards light. What's wrong with this one? Okay, why would that single sprout, which is right at the back and is furthest from the light, grow that way? Exactly. Okay. It probably couldn't tell where the light source was reliably, So instead of relying on light for its growth direction, it relied on gravity. Okay? If you grow up, you're eventually going to get into the light. Okay? That's just a natural evolutionary growth response of plants. So this one probably just relied on gravity, okay, and grew straight upwards. And he's probably now getting light, okay, over here, okay, above the others. Instead of growing like this, like the other ones were to get into the light, it was easier to grow this way. Austin. Yeah, once it gets into the light, yeah, it'll probably start to grow more towards that side. Yeah. Okay, auxins are our first plant hormone that we are going to talk about. Now, auxins are essentially plant growth hormone, PGH, essentially. Okay, not HGH, not like, what's his name there from the Yankees, okay, and all the other roid monkeys that use that stuff. Okay, auxins will cause a plant to get longer. Okay, auxins always signal a lengthening of the plant. The way that they do that is they actually make individual cells get longer. They don't make more cells, they make existing cells get longer. Okay, and that's going to trigger a change in height for the foliage of a plant, or depth if we're talking about the roots of a plant. Okay, auxins will work in both places, always stimulating a lengthening of the cells of the plant. Okay, now these two pictures here are of the same place, taken a few weeks apart. What do you think happened there? Well, I mean, it's a decent guess, drought, I suppose, but the river still got water in it. Right? You can see here's that little tributary. There it is there. Okay? This tributary is right here. It's zoomed in a little bit more the second time. No, the river flow, I mean, it looks a little smaller, but mostly it looks smaller because a lot of stuff has washed into it from over here. Okay? All the plants from this picture are dead. Okay? What could have killed them in that short of order, just a couple of weeks? I'll give you another hint. This is taken in Southeast Asia in the late 60s. Yeah, this is jungle on the left, and the jungle is dead on the right. Not radiation, but you're getting closer. Chemical herbicides. Okay. In Vietnam in the late 60s and early 70s, there was a war going on between the United States and the North Vietnamese army. Okay. The Americans were really struggling in that war because obviously in a jungle there are a lot of places to hide. Okay, and what was happening was they would send out patrols, and the Viet Cong, which is the North Vietnamese army, would ambush them. Okay, they'd jump out of nowhere and ambush the U.S. soldiers and kill them. And so obviously the Americans didn't like that very much. So they said, fine, we're going to find a way to get rid of the jungle. You can't burn a jungle down. It's too wet. Okay? It's just not going to work to try and set a fire. Although napalm does a decent job, but napalm tends to kill innocent people at the same time. So they wanted to try and avoid that. Okay, so they went to the CIA and they said, we need you to develop something that'll kill all the plants. Of course, the CIA, with at that time their nearly unlimited resources, hired a bunch of chemical engineers and botanists and figured out how to make something that would kill all broadleaf plants. Okay, that stuff is called 2,4-D. Okay, it has a big long, the D stands for like diethyl monomer. It's got this big long name. Anyway, it's Killex. Okay, the stuff that we use now to kill dandelions was initially developed by the CIA as a defoliant. Okay, its code name was Agent Orange. Because look what it does. They're dead. And when plants in a rainforest die, okay, because they're very heavy, they tend to fall quickly. And with the amount of rain that's there, with them gone and falling over, there's a lot of erosion that can happen very quickly. And so what's happened here is that you can see that the water color has changed drastically as well, because now there's a more sediment pouring into the river. Okay? This is water here, the river. No. It actually, it looks dry, but it's actually just the dead plant material. Okay, that's why it's called Agent Orange. It killed everything. Okay, and it would literally just lay waste to whole regions. Now, the idea here was that we created this stuff that's a good way to get rid of the places where enemy soldiers can hide, and it doesn't kill people or animals or things like that, except that it does. 2,4-D is actually incredibly carcinogenic, which means it causes cancer. Okay, they didn't, of course, know that at the time. But that's why things grow themselves to death when you spray them with it. Okay, the plants, that's actually what it causes. It just causes them to grow until they're too big, and they can't support that growth with their photosynthesis. They essentially starve and get weak because they've grown primary and no secondary, and they fall over and die. Okay. So it worked in the sense that it defoliated a bunch of areas, but unfortunately it killed people's crops because it killed plants, and it gave farm animals and the people that it was sprayed on like cancers fairly quickly, including their own soldiers, because they would have them out there and the helicopters would fly over and spray it, and they'd just tell them, "I'll just put your poncho on." Okay, but they would inhale the fumes. Has anyone ever used Killex? It has a very distinctive smell. Okay, it's a rotten smell, and if you've ever had to spray it, like that smell just stays with you for a while, and it's really bad for you. Because I used to spray it at the golf course I worked at, and it was, yeah, like I would wear a suit and a mask when I sprayed, because it was just awful stuff. But it worked, okay, in that it was essentially a synthetic auxin. They sprayed it on the plants, and the plants would absorb it with carbon dioxide through their stomates. Okay, and then once it was in the tissue, it acted like regular auxin, except it was an overdose. Okay, so rather than having a healthy amount of growth hormone, these things were overloaded with it, and they would literally grow themselves to death. Okay, now this is what happens with any hormone. If you get too much of something, it's going to cause problems. Okay, so if we're looking at, like, the roid monkeys who go on the juice to get huge, okay, they're usually injecting themselves with either HGH or testosterone, okay, or things like that, in order to cause faster than normal cell growth. Okay, the advantage of taking steroids is that you heal faster. Right? So if you go and work out really hard in the morning and you're not on steroids, that's it. Like, you're done for the day. Those muscles can't be worked again because they're just fatigued and they need to heal. And that's going to take you a day or two. If you're on steroids, those cells heal faster. So you can work them out in the morning, and then you can savagely go and work them out again later in the day because they heal that much faster. So you make gains more quickly. Okay? You still have to work. Don't get the idea that you can just inject yourself with steroids and become jacked. Okay? It doesn't work that way. You have to work at it still. But you can get it faster because you can work out more often. Now, what are the drawbacks? If you're a guy and you take a whole bunch of testosterone, what's going to happen? Here. Yes, you will have that problem as you age. Yeah, you're the muscle will, because you have an abnormally large amount of it, will turn to flab. Yeah. Okay, if you stop working out. What else? Actually, that guy whose bicep exploded actually had a horrible infection in his bicep as a result of injecting steroids directly. What's that? Yeah, well, you rupture because they get big, but usually they also have an infection from not cleaning their needles well enough when they're doing the injections. Like the one guy who's the first one I saw, the guy, he had like a massive staph infection. Okay, it actually was eating away his muscle. Yeah, it was disgusting. But the big thing is that there are parts of your body that are naturally producing that hormone. If there's suddenly large amounts of that hormone in your body, what do they stop doing? They stop producing it. your body has these natural feedback mechanisms that say, okay, there's enough of that, stop making it, or slow down, you're working at the right pace, or speed it up, we need a little more, right? But if you're constantly injecting it artificially, the cells that normally do it stop. And as with all things, when you stop using them, they shrink. Think about what part of you, if you're a guy, produces testosterone. Okay? It will shrink. The boys, will shrink. Okay? That's not a good thing because that, yeah, it's kind of important. Okay? Later in life, you might need that. If you want to have children, it's kind of a big deal. Okay? And actually, if you're using massive amounts of testosterone, it is possible that you can become not only unable to function properly, i.e. impotent, okay, but you could also become sterile in that you no longer produce sperm, okay, which both would make you unable to father children, okay. Problem's not only limited to men, okay. In the 80s, lots of female sprinters were also taking testosterone, okay, and lots of East German women swimmers. Okay, if you ever saw, like in the 80s, the pictures of the East German women's swim team, is like these ladies with mustaches and stuff, because they were taking massive amounts of testosterone, which was essentially giving them secondary male sex characteristics, because it's a male sex hormone. Okay, if you take it as a female, your cells know how to respond to it. Okay, and so you start growing, obviously the thing they were desiring, big muscles, okay, because that's a secondary sex characteristic of men, is to generally have larger muscles. But there's also other things that go along with that: growth of hair, okay, in places maybe where it shouldn't, like your mustache, okay, and also the removal of female sex characteristics. Okay, so essentially, a lot of them would their menstrual cycles would be interrupted. Okay, and they would become infertile, possibly permanently. Okay, other secondary sex characteristics would begin to disappear. They often found that their breasts would shrink and things like that. They would actually start to look very mannish. Okay, as a result of taking obviously male hormones. Okay, so it's okay to have the right amount of hormones, plant or animal, but if you have the wrong amount or you're taking too much, there's going to eventually be a cost to that. Okay, and that's what happens with auxins. Now, in small amounts, auxins can do good things. Okay, when the CIA sprayed this stuff, they sprayed it on like 100 times stronger than they needed to, because if a little bit was good, lots was better. Okay, that was the general thinking. In fact, on the helicopters they had built to do all the spraying, they actually painted on the side a picture of Smokey the Bear. Only you can prevent forest instead of forest fires. Right. So, you know, in small amounts, this stuff actually works. Kill-X is way more diluted than Agent Orange was ever used at. Okay, and it does a pretty good job of killing weeds. It's also used in smaller, even way smaller amounts, to produce seedless fruit. Okay, in order to produce fruit, a plant has to have been fertilized. Okay, so if you're looking at the flower of a plant, okay, the flower of a plant is actually the sex organs of the plant. Okay, both male and female are in the flower. Okay, if you've ever looked inside of the kind of the middle of the flower, there's kind of it's kind of shaped like this, and then there's these things that kind of go off to the side. Okay, on these things is where the pollen is. Okay, they're called the anthers. That's the male part of the flower. Okay, this is the stigma and the style, and the ovary is actually at the base of the flower. And the ovary is what becomes the fruit. But it only becomes the fruit if pollen, which contains plant sperm, lands here and fertilizes the egg that is in the ovary. Okay, that's how you get fruit. But then fruit is going to have seeds in it, because the seed is the embryo of the plant. Okay, everybody following me so far? Okay, you're getting the birds and the bees talk today, big time. Okay, but okay, that's how it happens. Okay, you get plant sperm lands on there, it fertilizes the egg, and you get a fruit with seeds in it. That's the only way you're supposed to be able to get fruit. even if the plant fertilizes itself, which happens lots. Okay, plants can do that. But you can trick a plant. You can make it think that it's been pollinated. And then it will go through all that stuff and it will make fruit. But the fruit won't have any seeds because there actually hasn't been a fertilization event. Right? Now, if you've ever bought like seedless grapes, lots of us do because seedless grapes are vastly superior to seeded grapes because then you don't get that crunch in the middle of the grape. Okay? But even on a whole cluster of grapes that are supposed to be seedless, is it possible to get one or two that have a seed in them? Yeah, you do, because sometimes they actually do manage to pollinate before they're actually sprayed very lightly with this stuff. Okay? If it lands on the flower, it tricks the plant into thinking that it's been pollinated and it makes fruit with no seed. If you got one with a real seed in it, yes. Because that you only get a real seed if fertilization has occurred. The plant won't produce a seed if that doesn't. It's a very small amount, very, very small. And I mean, obviously, the Food and Drug Administration has regulations against how much of it can be in people's food and things like that. So, I mean, it's supposed to be safe, right? And I eat lots of seedless fruit, and I don't worry about it. Okay, but lots of people who are, ooh, I'm only going to eat the organic stuff. Which is a good, healthy choice. That would be their argument. Why would I eat something that's been sprayed by that? That doesn't make sense to me. Well, breaking my teeth on seeds doesn't make sense to me, but it's all personal choice, right? Eating organic food is definitely a healthier choice than eating other stuff. But so you can get that, you can get seedless fruit. If you look here at what happens to plants that are normal versus plants that are sprayed, you can see in the normal plant they get pretty good root growth and not a lot of growth above. Wild type means the natural form. This form's been tagged, with additional auxin. Lots of above ground growth and very little root growth, which is not going to be supported for very long. How do you support all that foliage if you've only got two little tiny roots? All right, questions on auxins. So the big thing with auxins is that they cause a lengthening of the plants. So single most important function of auxin is to stimulate the elongation of cells. What is going on with that? In young developing shoots. All right, the next thing are cytokinins. Cytokinins cause cell division, or cytokinesis, the splitting of cells. Right? Cytokinins are important for plants because they essentially allow them to replace cells that are getting old or dying or whatever. It's not that dying cell or sick cell will divide, but other cells around it will, and they'll eventually just kind of replace it. And that essentially is what allows some plants to reach great age. We've got the oldest living organism on Earth is the Methuselah tree. It grows somewhere in one of the national parks in California. It's secret. Its location is kept secret because, well, there's sick people out there who would go out and kill it. But it's supposedly somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 years old. Very, very old. There's no way an animal could ever live to that age, right? But plants generally can achieve greater ages as long as they're not an annual that dies each year. But perennial plants can constantly replace cells that are getting sick or dying with new cells by secreting cytokinins. Now, of course, when scientists discovered this, they're like, wow, that's like the fountain of youth. We got to figure out how to do that in people. Except rapid cell division in people is cancer. That's not it, and that's what they found in all the lab tests on rats and things like that. They basically all developed tumorous growths that it wasn't good for them. So it doesn't necessarily go across. Because it reproduces asexually. Yeah, eventually some of them die, but yeah. Okay. Right. So does that make sense? So essentially, cytokinins stimulate cytokinesis, cell division. That's their big job. Right. So you can see here in this diagram, this would be a normal plant. sometimes plants will allow lower growth to die off because it's not getting sunshine anymore and just kind of concentrate on the new and upper growth, okay? Whereas one that's tagged with more cytokinins is maintaining all of its foliage, okay, for a longer period. Okay, gibberellins. Okay, gibberellins are similar to auxins, okay, but are produced and work kind of in different places. Okay, so roots and young leaves are the major sites of these. Okay, and they stimulate growth in both the leaves and the stem, but have very little effect on root growth. Okay, in stems, gibberellins stimulate cell elongation and cell division, both. Okay, so if we're looking at dwarf versus tall, okay, gibberellins would be produced more in the tall version. Okay, we can also get more fruit, okay, if there's more gibberellins, because they'll produce more branches on which more blossoms could be found, and then obviously you're going to get more fruit. So sometimes you'll see that happen a little bit. Over here on the left, okay, this is rice. Both of these are rice plants, okay, but the rice on the right has what the Chinese call foolish seedling disease. Foolish seedling disease is caused by a fungus that grows on the roots. And this fungus produces a toxin that actually causes plants to produce more gibberellins than they're supposed to. And what happens is the plants grow lots of stem and not much leaves, and they get tall and fall over because their stalks are too skinny. Look at how thick the stalks are on the left versus how thin they are on the right. Okay, so they grow too fast and then they fall over and die, foolish seedlings. Okay, that's where the name comes from. Okay. So they stimulate growth in the leaves and the stem, but they are primarily a stem kind of a thing. Okay, abscisic acid. This one is a hugely important plant hormone here in Canada. Abscisic acid signals a time of dormancy for a plant. Okay, so what this picture is showing here is that they've essentially put different amounts of abscisic acid in all of these plants. Okay, these ones here got the most. These ones in the back got the least. Okay, that's why they're large and have flowers on them. Whereas these ones were given lots of abscisic acid, and the abscisic acid tells the plant, hey, it's time to go dormant. Okay, it does that. Okay, and you might want to write this down because it's not in your notes. Okay, it actually disrupts the production of chlorophyll. Okay, there's a chemical pathway that your cell uses to make chlorophyll. Okay, and abscisic acid disrupts one of the steps in that pathway. And so the plant's cells cannot produce chlorophyll, which is why when there's abscisic acid being produced, the leaves change color, okay? Because the plant is no longer producing chlorophyll. If you're no longer producing chlorophyll, you're no longer carrying out as much photosynthesis because all that's left are the other pigments that are in the leaves. And they don't carry, I mean, they carry out some photosynthesis, but not like chlorophyll, okay? And so the result is, if you're not carrying out a lot of photosynthesis, you're not needing to transport very much water. So this essentially prepares a plant for winter. Not having chlorophyll means no photosynthesis, no water transport. Water is essentially drawn, or essentially just leaves the plant, okay? It's not transported anymore. And now there's no water in the plant when it freezes, which is important. You don't want to have a whole bunch of water in the xylem of a plant when freezing temperatures arrive, because it'll expand and it'll crack a tree open or any other kind of plant. So abscisic acid signals a plant for dormancy. Okay, what do you suppose tells a plant it's time to produce this?
When it gets colder.
Well, there's one other signal that's more reliable than temperature, because we know, I mean, especially in Canada, right? You get snow any month of the year. We can get a cold snap and have it be cold for a week, even in July or August. Okay, what's a more reliable signal? Right, day length. Okay, every year after June 21st, the days start getting shorter. Okay, and by the end of August, okay, day length has gotten short enough that the plant is realizing its rate of photosynthesis is going down. Okay, that signals the production of abscisic acid. Okay? And abscisic acid will then further that shutdown of chlorophyll production and shutdown of photosynthesis, and the plant prepares for dormancy. Okay? That's how it works here in preparation for winter. Desert plants can also use it in preparation for the hot, dry season. Okay, so it'll signal it in basically the opposite direction. Pine trees don't need it. This is something that's basically just for deciduous trees. They do produce it to an extent, but it doesn't signal them to lose their leaves because their needle leaves don't contain very much water. Okay, which is why they grow at high altitudes where it's drier typically. Okay, now unless you're of course like a larch or a tamarack, which are the spruce that can lose their needles. They have lots in Kananaskis actually. If you go into Kananaskis in like mid-September, there'll be like mountainsides that are like this bright fire orange, and it's all the larches have their needles are now orange and falling off. It's kind of a cool thing. Okay, so this hormone slows down the growth of a plant, okay, and makes it assume a more dormant state. Okay, and make sure, guys, that you star this as well. Okay, that is the mechanism that does that. Okay, it disrupts the production of chlorophyll. Okay, ethylene. Ethylene's it's not really a hormone; it's a gas. Okay, it's a gas that is produced that causes the ripening of fruit. Okay. Bananas produce tons of ethylene gas. That's why there's the banana principle. You guys ever heard the banana principle? If you buy bananas yellow, they'll be brown before you eat them. If you buy them green, you'll eat them before they're ripe. It's almost always the case. Okay? But bananas produce tons of ethylene, which is why they ripen so quickly. And you've probably noticed you buy bananas on Tuesday, by Friday you better have them eaten. Okay? Or they're starting to get soft unless you like them that way, or you like making banana bread. Okay? Either way, they ripen really quickly because they produce a lot of this gas. Okay? Apples produce this gas as well, okay? Fair amount of it. We can use that if we want other things that tend to ripen slowly to ripen more quickly. Okay? I mean, around here, you got to, by mid-September, if you're lucky, you've got to pull your tomatoes out of the garden. Okay? But usually they're still green. So you got to pull them off the plant green so that they don't freeze, and then you got to let them ripen inside. Well, if you want them to ripen quickly, put them all in a box together with a couple of apples. Because the apples will produce ethylene gas that will actually cause the tomatoes around them to ripen. Okay? And they'll ripen way more quickly than if you just put all the tomatoes in a box. Now, putting them in a box obviously keeps the ethylene gas trapped. Okay? That helps to speed up the ripening process. But it's also ethylene gas that if it goes too far will cause them to rot. Okay? Because in a plant doesn't care whether its fruit looks, well, I mean, to an extent cares whether its fruit is appetizing or not, but if the fruit doesn't get eaten, the fruit needs to rot and fall off so that the seeds can grow next year. Okay? The fruit is a delivery mechanism of the seeds. It's either going to be eaten by something because it looks appetizing, and then the seeds will be deposited in a nutrient-rich medium somewhere else. Okay? Or the fruit won't be eaten, it'll fall to the ground, and the nutrients that are in the fruit will act as nutrients for the growing seed in the next growing season. Okay? Because, I mean, some plants, their fruit's poisonous. Okay? And all animals know it, and nothing eats it. Well, okay, that just makes sure that those seeds will fall to the ground near where the parent plant was growing, because obviously the soil there was good enough, and they'll grow the next year. Okay? Other plants, their seeds are so specific, okay, that their fruit has to be eaten by a certain organism, and it's only the digestive enzymes of that organism that can remove the coating from the seed and allow it to germinate the next year. This is like an incredible variation in what the plants have to do with their seeds. Okay? But in general, ethylene will cause the ripening of fruit. And in fact, a while back, they had like at the like one of those infomercials was for these green bags, okay, that would absorb ethylene gas. You could put all kinds of produce in them and it would last for months, okay, because the lining of this bag apparently absorbed ethylene gas. I don't remember what they were called, green bags or something like that. Okay, and your fruit and vegetables would last a long time because the ethylene wasn't trapped; it was actually chemically absorbed. Okay, I don't know what happened to them. They probably found the chemicals that were absorbing the ethylene were toxic or something. I don't know, but okay, they did have this thing, this application of this exact idea. Okay, so ethylene is important in the ripening of fruit and the aging or senescence of plants. Once a plant has produced its fruit, it's done. Okay, it either needs to get ready for winter, or if it's an annual, it needs to die. Okay, and this will actually signal that. Okay, the production of ethylene gas will actually signal the plant to essentially assume either a dormant state, that is, start producing abscisic acid, okay, along with the length of day, or that the plant's just done and it stops carrying out photosynthesis and just dies. All right, tropisms. Okay, tropisms are growth responses that result in curvatures of the whole plant. Okay, or of particular organs like a branch or something like that. Okay, the mechanism for this is a differential rate of growth of cells on opposite sides of the organ. So if we are looking at this plant right here, the bottom of the stem is growing faster than the top. What hormone do you suppose would be most important for that? Auxins. Auxins are the most important hormone for causing tropisms. Okay, so what happens is the cells on this side of the stem, the bottom, secrete or produce more auxin, which results in them getting longer. The ones on the other side grow at a normal rate. And what essentially ends up happening is, because you've got one side growing fast and the other side growing slow, is you get a pushing effect, okay, that pushes the plant upwards. Okay, everybody follow on that? Okay, is that it bends the plant in that direction because cells on one side are growing faster than cells on the other. Okay, that's going to cause all three of the tropisms we're going to look at. The mechanism is the same for all of them. It's differential rate of growth on opposite sides of the organ. So like, that's crucially important. Okay, and it's caused by those. Okay, so you get more auxins on one side. That makes one side grow faster than the other. That's what causes that pushing or bending of the plant. Okay, geotropism caused by gravity. Okay, it's a growth response to gravity. If I grow opposite gravity, I'm probably going to get into the light because light is generally upwards. Okay, so you can see that in this plant here. Okay, that little tree got pushed over. It's starting to grow back straight up and down again. Okay. Okay, same with the plant there tipped over on its side. Don't try that one at home. I don't know how they're keeping the soil in that. It seems like when you tip a plant over, a lot of the dirt would spill out. Okay, phototropism, okay, is growth caused by the location of light, so growth towards light. Okay, and you can see here, this is showing that mechanism of the tropism. The cells on this side, the shaded side, are growing faster than the cells on the bright side in order to bend the plant towards the light. Okay, and lastly is thigmotropism, which is a growth response to touch. Okay, normally this, I don't know, it's chickweed or something, would only grow about this tall, okay? But this chickweed has grown really tall because, well, they've taken it out, but there was a stick in that pot, okay, that was holding up that plant. So it didn't need to support its own weight, it could grow up the stick. Okay, again, with peas and things like that, they can put out vines, okay, those little coily things that they can grab onto other stuff with. Sometimes that stuff is other plants. Okay, they'll actually grow on other plants and crawl up other plants using them for support. Okay, it means they can get into the light without having to earn it for themselves. Okay. All right, the big thing to remember here, they're all caused by the same thing. Okay, that curving of the plant is caused by differential rate of growth on either side. All right, I want you guys to try those questions here, and we might have to go through them tomorrow, but at least see if you can get them done here in the last couple minutes of class.